Welcome, everyone. I'm Bobby Harris. I'm your host for today and the member engagement lead for the Utility Broadband Alliance. And if you don't know the Utility Broadband Alliance, it is a collaboration of utilities and ecosystem partners, those technology experts and consulting companies that are working together to champion the advancement and development of private broadband networks across the utility infrastructure across the United States. Our members are electric utilities, but it's also open to gas and water utilities. We have working groups. We've been around for about 18 months now. So we chose to do a survey, and we wanted to share the results with all of you. So on the webcast today with me are two of our main members. First of all, David Briesacker, who serves as the chair of the Utility Broadband Alliance Business Working Group. But in his day job, of course, he leads business planning and integration at Ameren, and it's a new group there that's focused on the elements of strategy, planning, and initiatives that align the OT network with the grid of the future, which is their planning there at Ameren. So we welcome you, David. Also with us today, having served more than 3 decades in the utility industry, is Kevin Malloy. Kevin had a long career with National Grid. He served as the UTC, Utility Technology Council, Region 1 chairman and the first telecom committee chair with UTC. And of course, now he brings his experience to the Utility Broadband Alliance by way of Anterix. So I'm really pleased to have both of you guys join me today. Your experience from a utility and industry perspective will help add color to what we learned from our first utility survey. And the UBBA utility survey had a pretty broad goal. We really wanted to judge the responses out to the utilities across the US that would help us understand the challenges that they see internally when thinking about private LTE networks. Respondents came from across the United States, from large electric utilities, and individuals represented utilities, everything from telecom managers to directors of grid operations to CIOs. So at the very end of this webcast, we'll also show you the link to the survey where you can take it now as well. We're continuing to gather information because we believe the more feedback we have, the better. So let's get straight into our slides and talk about some of the results that we saw. Clearly, as it says here, this public versus private networks was a couple of the questions that we asked, and we really wanted to get some responses, and nothing really surprised us too much. Of course, cybersecurity is going to be the highest ranked. We knew that going in, and we wanted to have a look at maybe what were some of the additional drivers and measures that utilities need to be concerned with. So David and Kevin, let's talk about these. You know, we said security and cybersecurity doesn't really surprise us, but give us a little color on what you're seeing here on these two results. David, if you'd like to jump in first, that'd be great.
Yeah, thanks, Bobby. I mean, yeah, to your point, no surprises on this one. I mean, security is and continues to grow in importance for utility industry. We manage a critical infrastructure, so I mean that's essentially the lifeblood for some of our communities in our nation. So keeping it secure is certainly important, and one of the elements to keep it secure and reliable is control, which are both kind of the two key takeaways I had from this.
Sure. Kevin, what are your thoughts when you look at these two questions?
Yeah, Bobby, I think in the responses, we really saw no surprise, but I think the fact that utilities have been strong advocates of private networks for a very long time implies that they desire ultimate control and also the reliability of a network that they can operate and manage with their own resources. With the proliferation of the number of devices that are being deployed, it's becoming even more important that utilities manage both control and security. With an increased focus on NERC SIP requirements that are coming, verification and documentation is going to be essential to keeping those networks private and up and running.
Right, and you know,
Yeah.
as we talk, go ahead, David.
I'm sorry, Bobby. I was going to actually kind of build upon Kevin's comment, because when you talk about the number of devices growing, yeah, that's certainly a trend. And when you think about that, that's really creating more of an exposure for utilities as well. The more points, the more access points that we have out there, the more control, the more security needs to be enhanced to make sure we keep it reliable and secure.
Yeah, absolutely, David. And that was a little bit of where I was headed with it too. This convergence of IT and OT within the utilities and those additional devices, I'm sure is making some challenges with cybersecurity. And also you have some new physical security challenges as well. But that again comes from that IT and OT collaboration or merging. Are you seeing that within your utility?
Most certainly. I mean, we've even at Ameren rebranded what's historically been called the IT department to call digital, because it's kind of refocusing on what the future is setting for us. We're no longer become just a support mechanism. We're becoming, especially the networks, are becoming an investment asset for the utility companies, because it's a foundational element to that grid of the future, as we call it.
Excellent.
And Bobby, it's also, a factor that a lot of the equipment now is IP based, and that's really kind of bringing the IT and the OT folks much closer together, really across most of the utilities.
Yep. That's an excellent point, Kevin. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Well, let's dig a little bit deeper into our survey then. The next slide here, it's a little busy. We decided to put 3 graphs on here to showcase some of the 3 questions that seem to go together. And certainly reliability, security, as we just spoke, scalability are going to rank the highest. And you can see that here for the benefits of private LTE. But interestingly, the total cost of ownership over the lifetime of the network is clearly a key driver and a decision point, but it's also something that desires more education from all of us who are thinking about this, from the network providers, from the telecom managers, up to the executives and the regulators. So David, I'm going to come back to you first also. Ameren's going through this journey, and talk a little bit about what your recommendations are and what you see when you look at these 3 charts.
Well, it's kind of no surprise again, because when you look at the benefits, I mean, they're very aligned with the concerns that we saw. That's pretty, it seems pretty intuitive. And when you talk about the business issues, I mean, this is kind of what we saw at Ameren too, is we've been trying to build the case for private LTE that, we're talking about, it's almost sequential. You look at the total cost of ownership model, which helps feed into, talking with your executive leadership and getting their support, which helps get support from the regulators. They kind of build upon each other in that way. And that TCO model versus the alternatives really opens up the doors to that discussion and shows the case for a private LTE. And that ties in well with the technical considerations too. The TCO is equivalent to the unique variables of spectrum, which is very unique for private LTE, and technical skills. We've found that those are 2 key pieces that are new to utilities, especially us, as we're trying to build that case, build the program for private LTE.
Excellent, excellent.
Bobby, I agree with David 100%. And you really have to realize, whenever there are large investments within the utility industry, the total cost of ownerships need to be evaluated. Critical to the success of a private network is the derived benefit for both the ratepayer and the shareholder. These are the 2 it's a tricky balance to be able to do that. And the physical costs are quantifiable, but there are a slew of costs that are intangible, or they call them soft costs, right? And those benefits could be anything from you getting fined from the FCC for having unreliable feeders to having things that are catastrophic, that the business, I won't go into all of the crazy things that are going on in the world, but all of the unfortunate things that are happening on the West Coast with the utilities, those are things that are not quantifiable right up front. So a couple are, really simple ones are minimizing outage times and efficiencies across the entire network and deploying things like VVO or IntelliGrid, those type of devices that can bring the exposure of the network back into the control center, bring those, intangible costs right back to the consumer and to the ratepayers.
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin, absolutely. You hit on it a bit. So from a technical consideration standpoint, certainly spectrum availability and in-house technical training seems to be sort of a sticking point here. But Kevin, from your experience at National Grid and David, from yours at Ameren, let's talk about that, those technical considerations a bit more. Kevin, go ahead.
Sure, Bobby. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Bob. On the technical training side, before I left National Grid, I assembled a team to help create a significant technical training portfolio for both management and union employees that ensured adequate technical training is being provided so that each and every technician or engineer can advance and become a subject matter expert on the equipment they work on. And you got to realize that these folks work on a plethora of different types of systems. They could be working one day on fiber, one day on microwave, one day on a metering system, one day on a skater system. So, and every one of those has a depth of knowledge that you have to have. Everybody's trained to be able to be a first responder, go out and fix the immediate problem, but to really get into a problem that's either chronic or system-wide, you have to be able to kind of have all of those people together and get everybody up to a level of competency. So we were doing this with a combination of training from in-house subject matter experts to vendor training, and then specific technology training like you would do with something like private LTE. On the spectrum availability front, we've seen a lot of different issues with spectrum over the past several decades, and the constraints within the utility. Everything really has been narrowband. You're talking about 12.5 kilohertz channels for LMR, 25 kilohertz for things like MAS. And now we've got the ability to go to things that are much more wide open. The alternatives are both for the technology and the spectrum, not simply the spectrum. And in the case of private LTE, there are several bands that are available. Some are with limited availability, such as 600 megahertz. We have Anterix 900 megahertz, and now we have the latest one that just completed in the auction is the CBRS, and those licenses are available now and have been purchased by a number of utilities, which gives a pretty good indication that the utilities are looking at private LTE across the board.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, David.
Yeah, I mean, the spectrum availability is one of the biggest things. I mean, you can't do a private LTE network without the spectrum, right? It's the foundational element, and it compared when you look at the whole program, it's a what we've seen is it's a smaller cost of the program, but it's an enabler, right? And the limited availability of it, to your point, Kevin, in the past has kind of not allowed this investment to happen. Now there's opportunities, and there's hopefully more opportunities that will come to us because of this realization of the benefits that a private, broadband-based network can do for utilities to enhance some of these benefits and address the challenges that we've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all of what you guys are talking about definitely hits on that total cost of ownership model, but the value weighed against that. Everybody knows you have to spend money on top-notch networks, but the value that we're seeing over private LTE networks, to me, really pushes the limit and really just allows that lifetime total cost of ownership model to be great. That's something, of course, that we'll talk about in a few minutes, that education piece. That's what UBBA has really been focusing on, is helping utilities understand all of these topics, understand not only the spectrum availability and what the different ones are and how they work and how they're interoperable with their other, as Kevin, you were saying, the SCADA systems or even the handshake for fiber or things like that. So there's a lot of technical frameworks that need to be put in place, and certainly that's what UBBA's goal is to help the utilities with that, while at the same time helping the vendor ecosystem, those technology creators, make sure that they're developing things that are standards-based and scalable for the utilities, and that will allow them to meet the promise of these networks. Clearly, there are some great promises. We'll get into
Bobby,
some.
if I may, one more comment. I mean, we look at this, and I think there's probably a little bit of angst when we as utilities look at such a, if you're going to build private LTE, it could be a substantial cost to build out your own network. And I think there's a little bit of concern when you're trying to talk to leadership about that, because like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of money to be spending on a communications network. We're an electric and or gas, company. But it's because it's an enabler for the future. When you take the total cost of ownership model and build it in and versus the alternatives and show the value, to your point, that's what I feel like really helps the story build. And also speaking to that, truthfully, we're not talking about putting in a new technology in the world. This is actually a proven technology. It's just the adoption of it for utilities that's unique. And I think if you don't mention that, you kind of lose sight of the overwhelmingness of the cost and how it's new to us, but it's really not new to the world. It's not like we're testing a new technology. So just wanted to make that comment too.
Yes, thank you. That's an excellent point. Excellent point. All right, so on this slide, you can see from the survey results, there's a significant gap on value of private LTE to the consumer. And the responses seem to indicate that private LTE is primarily a tool for increasing the operational aspects of the grid rather than enabling the consumer application. But guys, talk a little bit about what needs to be done to educate these stakeholders about the full capabilities of private LTE as more of a connectivity platform for the digital grid of the future. And David, let's start with you this time.
Sure, thanks, Bobby. I mean, when you look at this, there's kind of a smattering, excuse me, of different reference materials that they're looking for. So the way that we've looked at it is that the value of private LTE is a puzzle. It sets a foundation, but if you don't look at all the pieces together, you kind of miss out on the total value proposition. The operational benefits are certainly going to be the immediate benefit, and then there's opportunity for new services and other enablements in the future. So it's kind of normal from what I'm seeing here to kind of prioritize the near term versus the long term, but you need to kind of speak to both.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, Bobby, I agree with David. I like to view this as kind of it's both, right? The immediate benefit, as David said, to enable new services such as DER or things like that to seamlessly enter the market. There are hurdles today that private LTE being administered by the utilities will make that much easier and without having to have extra red tape, if you would, to get those services into the network. You have things like Volt VAR, but also there's new opportunities for the utilities where they can provide added value services to consumers, such as real-time rates, right? So things like that, if enacted properly, can provide significant savings to the consumers. And again, the soft benefits of reducing our carbon footprint by limiting the need for new power plants, things like that. Addressing the consumer applications concerned directly, I have a Wi-Fi thermostat. This year I upgraded my air conditioning system. National Grid, which is the utility I work for, is the utility I also pay my utility electric bill to. They actually have a program where they send me $40 a year to let them control the thermostat during peak periods. It's a pretty cool system. I get a notification on my cell phone. It says that they're going to they actually put the air conditioner down lower than my temperature, and then they shut it off for a few hours. It's seamless to me. Most of the time I'm not even around. So it doesn't really affect me. But I've never noticed it on days that the extreme heat's out here. I never really noticed the difference when I walk into the house that the temperature is either higher or lower because the electric company's working on the control of the thermostat. So those are benefits that you can get through the communications networks that's deployed through a private LTE network as well.
Yeah, and you kind of hit it there that we don't even realize it. And isn't that the best hope for utilities, is that the service is so reliable that consumers don't even think about it, don't even realize when the utility is doing some things, but at the same time are able to take benefit like you have. And I think that is truly the hope of private LTE, and being able to give more control not only to the utilities, but ultimately to the consumers who want it, those that do want it. So, I think that's a good point for sure. David, did you want to add anything? I saw you nodding.
Yeah, well, I was kind of relating back to some of our earlier comments we had on the other slides, in that enabling some of those new services like your utility has, Kevin, that you live in. There's other opportunities, and at Ameren, because at Ameren especially, we started to say that we're not in the utility business, we're in the customer business. Customers are at the center of everything that we do, because we want to enable new products and services that could build upon some of those examples that you spoke to, Kevin. And this ties back to the previous slides, in that, well, now you're creating more exposure points across the grid, and you want to have something reliable and under your control so you can ensure that it's protected and secure for them.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Yeah, excellent point there. Excellent. Well, thank you for providing that color for us on what we learned from our first utility survey. Let's talk a little bit about, again, back to the Utility Broadband Alliance and why we're doing the things we're doing. UBBA was established really for a place for the utilities to learn from one another, for technology experts and ecosystem members to cut through some of the hype and really educate the utilities, the policymakers, the commissioners, even the consumers at that point. And we want everyone to have the knowledge that they need. So the UBBA working groups, we have a business working group, which is the one that David chairs and the one that really established this survey and will take the deepest look at the results. We also have a use cases working group, and as the name suggests, it's looking at all the operational utility use cases that and what are the requirements from the broadband perspective. And on the UBBA website, you can see some information about some of those use cases as they're being published. So I suggest taking a look there. And then we also have a technology and cybersecurity working group. And of course, looking at not only the technology frameworks for private LTE broadband, but also, what are those cybersecurity considerations that we've talked through. So we have those three working groups, but part of what we wanted to learn from this survey was what more could UBBA do for our members? What more do the utilities really need? And so, of course, we want to take this into our planning for 2021, now that we're at the end of 2020, finally, to really look at the planning and what we need to do for the future for our members. So we'll have a lot of announcements coming up about those working groups, but as you can see here, we really are going to take these into our actual work plans. Guys, I'm kind of catching you off guard here, but any comments you'd like to make from your perspective about the UBBA working groups and what we'll do with this information for the future?
I'll comment first. very much so is with this business working group, I've been envisioning us trying to be an asset, a resource for the utilities on what are the things from the business perspective that they need help with to try and make the case for it. This survey is just one example of where we tried to identify, what are some of the key areas maybe we need to focus on, and then we can look at, to your point, different media, things that we can develop, if it's white papers or something like that, anything we can do to try and help the movement of this within the industry, because we can all benefit if we all move together. And so that's the way I envision, is that particularly our working group, the business working group at UBBA, to be a benefit.
Bobby, I think one of the big things with the UBBA and the utilities and also the ecosystem providers that are members, the use cases that are being deployed, such as those that David's done with the pilot at Ameren, and there are a number of other pilots going on across the nation at major utilities with private LTE. We don't have to recreate every use case and help try to figure out, okay, what, where the issues are, what the connectivity issues are, what about the application issues. Those are all things that we're talking about here within the UBBA and sharing best practices. Was on a call yesterday with a major utility, and one of their questions was, one of their statements was, we don't want to have to recreate everything from scratch. And our position was, we've got a really good insight into things with the UBBA for the development of the technology, white papers you can use for anything from educating regulators to your executive leadership, things on use cases, and also the security aspect. So I think that's what the UBBA brings to its members, is a kind of an encyclopedia of information that's being updated constantly from real life practice, right, that people are sharing. So I think that's been the goal, and I think it's really working.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Kevin. Thank you for bringing that to the forefront. And we do want more utilities and more to come and be part of it. And we want more organizations to get involved, because, like you say, we don't want to reinvent the wheel every single time. So that knowledge sharing is critical. Also, because we have some things that are behind the firewall for members only to access, being an actual member of UBBA is quite important, because you do get that behind the covers look and the ability to reach out directly to folks like David at Ameren and talk to them directly about what they're doing. So I think that is important. I see this survey, and the reason we've reopened it here, you can see on your slide the surveymonkey.com URL there. We would welcome any utility to go to that site, answer the questions yourself. But if you also have questions about what you saw today, what the survey results were, and what UBBA may be doing about that, please feel free to reach out. You can see our phone number, our email, our website. We want to be sure that everyone has access to UBBA so that you can come ask questions directly and get your own answers. But just, I guess, a final word from each of you before we wrap up here and call it a day. David, want to give a final word on what you really want people to understand?
Sure. Well, I mean, first of all, I want to say thanks to all those that did respond to the survey originally, and thank you in advance to those that may respond to this another time. I very much am looking forward to hopefully being, as I mentioned earlier, a benefit to all the utilities with this working group, and even personally, if there's anything that can be done, we'd be glad to collaborate. We're a collaborative industry and want to leverage that to its maximum capacity.
Kev?
And Bobby, one of the things I think is really important is in this knowledge sharing world that we're in, that the UBBA right now is really a fairly small entity, and it has a very, I'll say, a very nice comfort level of people interacting, right? So when you go to a UBBA call, which because of COVID, that's what we're doing. But when you go to a meeting, you actually get to network with people that are doing the exact same thing that you're doing or thinking about what you're doing. And I like to just give a special shout out to people like Southern Link that have been really supportive, Amarin that has stepped up and really been the first private LTE pilot since the deployment that Southern Link has done. And I think people are getting lessons learned. These folks at those companies and others are willing to pick up the phone at any time and talk to you about their experiences with either the ecosystem or the vendors specifically. So I think there's a lot to be learned there, and it's really an exciting time for UBBA.
It is, absolutely, Kevin. Thank you for those words. And my final thoughts are, look forward to great things coming from the Utility Broadband Alliance in the next few months. Some work around raising the level of executive engagement, around some policy understanding with the FCC and things that are going on there. Of course, that's the knowledge sharing, that's the collaboration that UBBA is so dedicated to. So I would say, please do reach out. If you have any questions, we're all here for you. And if you are a utility, please take the survey if you haven't already. And we look forward to the next time we get together. And we hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.